So I seem to be having like the worst luck lately with computer hardware. And here's why. And it's mostly the stuff I order from Amazon. And even I've had this with Newegg, and I guess just shipping and handling just really doesn't exist anymore, but it is what it is. So last year I had did my last build of the year, which is my personal rig, which we upgraded it. I went with this Be Quiet case, which I've quite enjoyed, but I have some issues with it. The LED in the fronts have stopped working, which is great. And then also the cases, and if you look at it, it's a little unstable, and long story short, I didn't catch this until after the build and just sitting on my desk. The case got bent. Well, to make things even better, if you look at this case and you remember watching my last video, I had the Be Quiet AIO in here. I had that thing for a week, and guess what? The pump died on me. Great. So I went with this Be Quiet, my Dark Rock Pro 4, old faithful, use her a lot of times, and just using her just to make this thing serviceable. Honestly, if I got to take out this AIO from my graphics card, this has to come out, and it's not convenient. So went to the local computer store, was talking to them about my cooling issue and how I had the issues with AIOs, blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. And long story short, the guy sold me on this one. Pretty much stated that this is what you want: the Artic Liquid Freezer 360 ARGB. Now, I've seen their coolers and they look okay, but the whole pump thing, and we'll see when we take this out, looks just kind of ugly, and I've never been a fan of that look, but I think it's something I could get past it. Doing some reviews on this thing actually makes some good claims to actually be more efficient with cooling AMD Ryzen CPUs. So I got a 5950X, and she kind of gets a little toasty. I mean, I peg out at like 93, 94 degrees with this Dark Rock Pro 4 with this 5950X, and with the Be Quiet cooler that I had, the 360, I was only hitting temperatures of 80, so I don't know, not sure. It could be something to do with the mounting, but either way, they recommended this, and for this setup that I'm going to have to use, I need to go in AIO. So we're going to do a review on this Liquid Freezer 360, and I'm also going to take this computer apart, and we're going back to my Corsair 4000D, because this case needs to go back to Amazon, because I don't want to deal with this case no more, because number one, it got damaged in shipping, so, and luckily I'm within that window so I can return it. So let's get this thing taken apart, and let's take a look at this cooler. All right, so let's open this up. Let's see what's inside. All right, so we got this box over here. Let's see what's inside this box. It's probably all the mounting hardware and everything. Yep. This is for the, oh, this one comes for the Intel LGA 1700. So you have that bracket if need be. And this one is AMD and all that other good stuff. Sweet. Let's get this thing out. All right, so first things first, I gotta say, this thing is a beefy cooler. I mean, 40 millimeters. It's a little beefy, especially compared to the Be Quiet one that I had previously. And I gotta say, that's nice. Another thing I do like about it is that it's actually all pre-wired. If you look over here, the RGB is all wired up, the fans are all wired up, and everything is just tied into these single connectors right over here. So you have your 4-pin, which is going to go into your CPU, and then you have your addressable RGB, which will, in this case, will plug it into the motherboard. They do sell a hub separately that you can buy, but this one will go straight into the motherboard. I can control it through the ASUS software. I know it has support for MSI, so that's actually pretty nice. I mean, a lot of the trouble that you have with these AIOs is just doing the wiring, and this is done for you. So hopefully we should have enough clearance where there shouldn't be a clearance issue on the side of this case right over here. So I am confident about that. So I already first impressions are actually pretty good on it. Now the one thing that, and I've heard about this cooler for a long time, and one of the reasons why I've never used it, it's just this, let's see if I get it right over here, that aesthetic. I mean, it's unique, you know. And there's two things I don't like about it is, number one, I mean, just the look. It's different, but I guess that's a matter of preference. And then you also have these little silver collars, which I guess we could take this out and spray paint this if we wanted to. So it's one of those things that you're not getting those neutral colors. I like to go with black and gray, so I guess this would work, but I just don't like that too much. But anyways, so now another thing to keep in So now, one thing to consider if you're doing this and you're installing this, make sure you have a computer or your phone up and ready. So the instructions, they have that QRC code or whatever they call it, the code that you can scan right over there. Once you scan it, it goes to their website. It has pretty decent instructions, and it tells you exactly what you're going to need to do. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to install these two mounts, which are right over here. And these two mounts go into these screws right over here. So you see one, you see two, so they're going to get screwed in right over there, and they do have the screws for that. So that's the first thing we got to do. And then of course your AM4 bracket, just take off the plastic tabs that typically come with the motherboard, and that will get mounted. And then these will go like this and something like that, just kind of mock it up loosely, and then you have these plastic spacers to kind of line everything up. So let's get this thing set up first, and then we'll go ahead and mount this on the motherboard. All right, so we need to install these mounts right over here, and if you see these mounts have like these little ears that stick out, they go this direction, orientation out that way. You couldn't put them in the other way, but no, it needs to go out that way. And if you look, there's actually the provision right over there where this gets screwed in. It uses these screws, and the screws could be found, there's only two of them, and they're actually found in the hardware that's actually used to mount this plate to your motherboard. So if you notice on the other side, you have these connectors over here. Kind of be careful with them and make sure you don't pinch them. So you want to make sure that this ear right over here goes underneath, just like so. Line it up. And then we could go ahead and we could screw it in. All right, so that's pretty much done on that end. Now make sure that when you install this, you take this plastic piece off. I actually had a video where I didn't, and I was surprised how well the thing kind of sort of ran, but that's another story, and I'll post a link to that video if you guys want to see that. So let's go ahead and let's set up the motherboard. All right, so the key thing and the way this works, and I guess maybe this is where they make their claims to be more efficient for AM4 Ryzen 3000, 5000, is these brackets. So if you look at these brackets, there's two of them, and to the naked eye they kind of look very similar, but they're very different. If you look at this one is actually longer right over here, and this one is shorter. And if you can see the height difference, this one is a little taller, this one's shorter. This one is going to go on the mount closest to your graphics card, so it'll be sitting on the bottom. This one is going to go on the top, which is going to go closest to the top of your case. Now, according to their instructions, if you look at it, you have a hole over here and you have a hole over here. You have two holes, and it tells you. So number one is actually going to be for your standard mounting for AM4, but number two, it says AM4 Ryzen 3000, 5000 offset mounting. It says offset installation allows the cooler to be better aligned with the hot spots of the Ryzen 3000, 5000 CPU and provide better performance. So because I'm running a Ryzen 5000 and 5950X, I'm actually going to mount it on number two, which would be the top. So it's going to be the top for this one, and if I look it over here, it would also be the top right over there. And I'll show you on my phone, but probably can't see it as much, but if you follow the instructions, that's pretty much how they show you how to do it. So it's interesting to see how much better this would make for performance, but I guess they took that into consideration trying to go for the hot spots over it. So let me go ahead and let's get this mounted. Now I'm just going to tighten them just loosely so it's not dancing around. This is a lot easier if you're doing this outside of the case, but considering that it's already mounted, I don't feel like taking everything completely apart, and also the fact that it's easier to show it to you this way a little bit, that's the way I'm kind of doing it. So let's mount the radiator. So the initial way that it comes in, if you're going to be using this Corsair 4000D case, it's tight. It's definitely tight. So this is what we're going to have to do on this. So the fans were initially mounted this way over here, which I thought was kind of weird, but it's fine. And I'd rather have them as intake because it's the airflow version, so it takes some air this way. So I had to mount the fans on the other side. Doing it the way that it comes, which I really didn't pay attention to or really notice it until mounting it, it's not going to fit that way. But if you take the fans out and mount them this way, as intake as they should be, then this will fit and you should be able to do it. Now the cool thing about these fans is, and I'll show you this right now, is that they're all daisy chained together, especially with the addressable RGB. As you can see right over here, they just kind of link and daisy chain together. And then the hub right over here has a three-way, so you can actually plug in all the fans into this, which goes into one wire over here. So it's a real clean, easy setup, but this is a thick radiator, so kind of keep that in mind. Now if you wanted to mount it on the top over here, especially in this case, there's no way it's going to clear. If you're going to use this radiator, you need to make sure that you have a decent sized case. You're definitely not going to put this 360 decent sized case, or it won't fit. It won't fit up here because there's definitely no room. It fits over here, but it's a little snug on that. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I'm going to keep putting this together, and we'll see how she looks. All right, so she's mounted up, but there's going to be some issues, and we're going to talk about that at the end of this video. So now, as far as this pump is going to get mounted just like so, according to the pictures, and it's going to be the outer holes right over here. So if you see that one right there, that's the hole that we're going to use. So we'll pop that in, put some thermal paste, put this up, and put this computer back together, and let's run some thermals and give you some thoughts on this. So this AIO is deceptively pretty good, and I hate to admit it. So here's what I got. Running AIO 64, it's almost been 20 minutes and we're at 51 degrees Celsius. Now typically in my house, I like to keep the temperature around 21 degrees Celsius. I like that temperature, it's comfortable and everything. So I think the garage is about 5 degrees warmer for ambient. So even in worst case scenario, inside the house, I probably would expect anywhere from 60 to 65 degrees Celsius. And this computer is sealed up. Now granted, I do something, I take off the mesh filters in the front because number one, I'd rather clean my computer more frequently and just get more airflow on it. But overall, I mean, the temperatures are pretty solid and this thing is quiet. So let's take a look how it looks inside. So inside, this kind of look over here is one that you just kind of, you got to get used to it. I will admit I'm not a fan of it, but the more I look at it, it is kind of growing on me. But considering that the performance it's giving me, I'm very impressed with it. Now also another thing too to consider, I mean this radiator 40 millimeters is pretty beefy and it's definitely getting the job done on it. Now prior to this I did have the Be Quiet 360 AIO, and I gotta say this thing puts that Be Quiet to shame, and it's sad because this is so much quieter. I mean, you don't even hear the pump. The only pump you hear is my EVGA pump because EVGA just loves their pump whine, but that's another story. But this thing is quiet. And Be Quiet, they have the whole double coupley pump, which the pump is supposed to be over here on the tube and everything to prevent vibration and lower noises. That pump was way more audible than this. Not to mention that the difference between this cooler and that cooler, yes, granted at 360 degrees, but this one being so much thicker, I mean, I was talking about a 10-degree difference on it, and you get silence with it. So I gotta say, I'm definitely impressed with this cooler. Here's the downside of this. If you're gonna get this cooler, do not get the RGB version, and here's why. I ran into this issue, and the issue that I ran with the RGB version is that if I was going to mount it the way they wanted to, which ideally I guess the setup that they have is that you would mount it up top looking at it, which is fine, all the connectors and everything would fit fine on it. But this is the 4000D, I'm not going with a bigger case, and I had to mount it this way. So if I mounted it where the fans were over here and the radiator was right over here, the screws would hit, because if you see I have like no clearance over here, and I couldn't mount it that way. So the only way I was able to mount it was to put the fans in the front, which is ideally because you want to have intake in there. But by doing that, the ARGB cables don't reach, and I wasn't able to hook them up. It's kind of a bummer, but it's not the end of the world in the sense that I could get a ARGB extender, which would allow me to connect the header from here into one of these over here, because I only have the first fan hooked up, and I wasn't going to hook up the whole thing without having it all set up. But I could hook up the first fan to it. These piggyback fine, this piggybacks fine, but it doesn't reach from here to here. So you're gonna need an extension if you're gonna mount it this way, or if you have a bigger case, you could round 360 up here and not have to mess with anything out of the box. So looking at it, if you're gonna be using a smaller case for this, go with the non-ARGB version, because this thing is pretty thick. It's tough to fit in the front, and if you're going to adjust the fans the way that you're going to do intake this way, you're not going to be able to have enough slack, especially because the cables are so short to run your ARGB. The Artic 360, definitely a good cooler. I definitely recommend it, and something to consider. Very impressive performance considering the price, which these things are going for about, I believe, and this is for the RGB version, is about $119 to $129, just depending on where you get it at, and it's like $10 cheaper if you don't get the RGB version. So definitely something to consider. So hope you found this video helpful and useful. Thanks for watching, and we'll see what we'll come up with next.